Hey, everybody. You are about to hear a brief retelling of the movie The Power of Identity. Enjoy the movie. Peter was born in 1930 in South Africa, 2 weeks after an elephant trampled his father. He was nursed by an African maid and her son became Peter's best friend. The boy's father was a farmer, but his mother was not. When all the cattle died because of the pestilence, the woman broke down mentally and physically. They had no more money and Peter had to be given to a boarding school. As a memento, she left her son a bracelet that her late husband had given her. The boy was put in a car and taken away from his father's home. There was only enough money for the poorest boarding school, which was attended by Afrikaners, descendants of Dutch immigrants. Peter himself was from a different tribe, a tribe of Englishmen. The preacher is just saying that they should get together, drive out the English and put them in their place. 40 years ago, the English killed 20,000 Afrikaner women and children in concentration camps. As the only English boy in the school, Peter had a hard time. Every day the other pupils came up with new ways to bully him. Today he was pissed on in a crowd, after which Peter began to wet the bed. During the night, the boy was woken up and told that his mom had died. The thought that he would have to stay at the boarding school terrified Peter. He told his nanny about his problems and the woman invited the Zulu sorcerer to add courage to him. The bravest chicken jumped out of the white circle and became his guide. During the ritual, Peter had a vision of a running elephant that stopped right in front of him and stretched its trunk forward. The shaman convinced the boy that the spirit of the Zulu warrior lived inside him and he would no longer suffer at night. The chicken stayed with Peter, it became his best friend, and at night warned of approaching hooligans. A month later, war broke out in Europe. The Africans were happy because Hitler promised to drive the British out of South Africa. All the boys went mad, swastikas were everywhere. The eldest Afrikaner, Botha, decided to perform a ritual to get rid of the British. He hung up Peter's chicken and, shouting, "Hello Hitler," killed it with a slingshot. The boy got angry and pushed Botha, who fell and stabbed himself in the ass with the flag. "Hang him," cried Botha. The boy was hung by his feet and Botha decided to execute him like a chicken, but a teacher came in and saved Peter's life. The next morning Peter buried his only friend. The nanny and her son left for their homeland. The boy was left all alone. The good thing about Peter remembered his grandfather and took him to the town of Barberton, where mostly lived Englishmen, but the old man had no idea what to do with him, so the boy's mentor became his friend, a German musician nicknamed Dog. When the war broke out, Dog gave concerts in South Africa. The Nazis killed his entire family because they wanted peace, not war. His grandson was about the same age as Peter. The educated man shares his knowledge and his wisdom with his pupil every day. One day, a military officer came to Doc and told him that because he refused to register as a foreigner, he would serve time in prison until the end of the war with Germany. To the British, Dog was the enemy, but to the Africans who ran the prison, he was the perfect representative of German culture. The commandant allowed him not only to plant a garden here, but also to move a piano. Dog knows that the boy often gets in trouble at school, so he decides to introduce him to a boxing coach, but he is busy preparing the athletes for the championships. So they turn to his assistant, a dark-skinned convict. He warned the boy never to say sir to him or the guards would beat him for it. Gil has spent 40 of his 45 years in various prisons. He has been teaching the boy the theory for 2 months now, but the boy can't wait to start fighting. However, Gil will not teach him how to fight, but combinations. He will show him a special combination, the Lapida 8. The trainer has Doc leave the prisoners leaves of tobacco with which he wraps his cacti. Dark-skinned Afrikaners are called Kafra. So the malfunctioning one got a beating from the sergeant for harassing the light-skinned one. Dog tried to stand up for the man, and the boy promised that he would leave tobacco in a bucket near the piano, one of the few pleasures of prisoners. And so the 5 years flew by. While everyone was waiting for the war to end, the International Boxing Championship was being discussed. Thanks to Gil, Dean became the champion in his weight class. He also became the unofficial scribe in the prison. He knows many languages and writes letters for all the tribes. Also, Peter keeps bringing tobacco, so the prisoners love him and sing songs in his honor. They call him the Rain Lord, a man of legend who can help them. The sergeant almost reveals the conspirators, and Gil manages to switch the tobacco bucket at the last moment. The rascal dipped his boot in the dung and ordered the Kafu to eat it. Gil obeyed, knelt down and took some in his mouth. The sergeant wiped the rest on the prisoner and threatened that one day he would punish him in the cruelest way possible. Peter helped his friend up, but he only added that they had to eat shit every day. If the sergeant found tobacco, all the prisoners would be beaten to a pulp. Peter was heartbroken at the humiliation of the man he loved. The prisoners sang into the night in support of Gil, knowing that they would be locked in the barracks for 3 days without water. One day Dog came running with the happy news that the war was almost over and he would soon be able to return home to Germany. Only Peter, on the contrary, was sad. The commandant asked Doc to organize a concert in honor of the commissioner's arrival. Gil is very happy about this, because this performance will actually be for them. The voices of the prisoners will become an instrument. Peter has written the lyrics in the languages of the local tribes. They will humiliate the guards and they won't even understand. Each tribe got a part in their own language. The suspicious sergeant wondered what the punks were singing about. All the prisoners were led out into the courtyard and placed on the ground, only Gil Pete lingering over his shirt. The concert had begun. Gil Pete hurried to the others as he was suddenly stopped by the sergeant. He is about to beat all the secrets out of the prisoner, starting with what the cons are now singing about. He beats and chokes Gil and he has to translate the chorus. The guards are running back and forth, they're scared. Such are the words of the song, "You're all cowards," Gil added. The scoundrel smashed his face and started beating the defenseless man brutally. The boy realized everything when he saw the sergeant. He hugged his friend and he died in his arms. Hearing all the tribe singing together, Gil Pete challenged the sergeant and died a free man. A month later, the sergeant was found hanged on a rope in Gil's cell. When the war ended, Doc went to Germany and Peter moved to Johannesburg, where he enrolled in a private school. Not only that, he and another student became candidates to study at Oxford. During a boxing match, Peter caught the eye of a red-haired girl from another school and was knocked out. He never took his eyes off the stranger again. In the next round, Peter had no problem knocking out his opponent, but he didn't care about that anymore. A friend told him which room the red-haired stranger lived in. He climbed to her balcony and immediately offered to meet, but Maria's father, the head of the Nationalist Party, and he would never allow her to meet with an Englishman. Despite this, they agreed to see each other again. In the middle of the day, the police beat up the calf for nothing and took him to the police station. Maury Gilbert brought his friend to a famous trainer who works with champions. The rich man paid for Peter's training 6 months in advance. The combination of 8 punches did not fail and the schoolboy knocked out his opponent. Peter is surprised that in this hall in the ring can meet African, dark-skinned, and Englishmen. He had never seen such a thing in his life. Peter went to Maria's home to meet her father, Professor Murray. The man is in favor of complete apartheid, that is, moving all South African tribes to reservations so that they do not prevent whites from living on their lands. Peter got into an argument with him and angered Mayor forbade the young man from dating his daughter. The trainer offered Peter a fight against the dark-skinned boxer Gideon, even though it was forbidden by law. The young man replied with a refusal, and Maria was already waiting for him in the hall. She was ready to go against her father. The young man was stopped by Mr. Najizi, a man who was in prison with Gila. He knows Peter and asks him to meet Gideon in the ring. That way they can speak out against apartheid. Then the police intervened. They started calling Kafka names and chasing them home before curfew, and Peter had to lie that Gideon was his servant. Mary was frightened, but not by the rudeness of the policeman, but by the Aborigines she had been bullied by since she was a child. Mary ordered the policeman to keep an eye on the young Englishman. Peter had seen the terrible conditions in which the tribes lived, and this was still a good neighborhood. A mixed fight ensued. Maria froze and the South African fierce opponent. After a knockdown, Peter was saved from defeat by Gong. The coach noticed that Gideon was drinking water and told him to hit the body, but Peter fell again. He remembered the sorcerer and the elephant, which he was not afraid of as a child, and was able to get back on his feet. Gathering his strength, he knocked Gideon out. His victory was met with silence by the locals, but Gideon himself raised his opponent's arm and shouted, "Rain Lord." The crowd echoed his words. After the fight, Maria said she would never forget the evening and invited the young man to go to the school ball with her. Sergeant Botha saw them. Gideon asked Peter to come to him so people could see them training together. Miriam is here to teach children and is due to marry Gideon in a month. A huge line lined up in front of the restroom. The government only allows them to have one toilet per 200 people. Only 2 residents for the whole settlement can attend school. This means that the black people will be illiterate and will continue to do the hardest and dirtiest work. They only have a future if the dark-skinned Africans become on equal footing with everyone else. Gideon asks his white friend to teach their children to read, just as he taught all the prisoners in the prison to sing, but Peter is hesitant. Peter asked the professor to secretly teach a dozen Aborigines within the school walls. The professor shared the students' views, so he agreed. The first class will begin during the ball, and Mary resented the guy because he was going to change the world instead of being with her. At Mayor's house, everyone is served by a dark-skinned maid. Mayor is going to get a place in the government. He is going to leave only those dark-skinned people on the streets who can be of use to them, and the rest will be finally driven into the barracks. Maria objected to her father and told him that she had been in Alexandria with Peter. Mayor threatened that the girl would now leave the house only for school, and during the argument he hit her. Mayor ran away and Peter led his students to the school. Sergeant Botha was nearby. Peter and Maury teach the indigenous people English. Maria joined them, but the next day the police showed up to close the school. Peter recognized the name of the sergeant, a boy Nazi who had bullied him as a child. The professor ordered the black classes to stop and his friends were given letters. They were both accepted to Oxford. Peter got a full scholarship, bought in the gym. He confessed that after that incident he was kicked out of boarding school and his father put him in a barn with animals as punishment. The police beat up the coach and Peter, especially Gideon. Only the national heavyweight champion was able to stop the massacre. Botha threatened to close the gym and to deal with Peter. A young man climbed into Maria's window and suggested that she run away in a month to England. For the time being, her father sends her to the Pretorio to her aunt. Peter gave the girl his mother's bracelet and professed his love. The coach went against the government and painted on the door a dark-skinned fighter fighting against a white man. In the evening, the brave man was arrested and Botha doused the gym with gasoline and burned it down. After the beating, Gideon lost an eye. Peter and Maury gathered the local people in the church to teach them literacy. Maria escaped again and joined them. Just then a mob of policemen burst into the church and began beating everyone. Maria broke free from Botha's arms and ran to Peter. She pushed away her lover and received a strong blow with a baton on the head. The girl fell to the floor and died. At the funeral, Mayor grabbed a shovel and almost beat Peter with it. A huge crowd of black people came to the cemetery grateful to the girl who wanted to help them. After the death of Mary, Peter no longer wanted to fight and was going to go to Oxford, but when he saw the children who already read English well, he hesitated and Gideon persuaded him to stay. However, the police raided the same night to find Peter. Botha saw an old enemy and chased after him. The police began to just shoot the residents running down the street. They burned their dwellings. Botha nails the African and shoots Peter, but Gideon pushes him away and is himself shot in the leg. The colonel shoots everyone indiscriminately. Gideon saw his fiancée with her children. She was saved by a man who killed the colonel with a spear. Botha was beaten by Nangisi to give Peter up, but the guy ran out to him himself and demanded that the cops stop. However, Botha is not going to take him alive, as in his childhood he spat in Peter's face and started beating him, but his boxing skills helped the guy to fight back and knock out the villain. When Botha came to his senses, he was about to shoot Peter. But Gideon saved him again and bludgeoned Botha with a block of wood. After that night, The friends escaped from the police and fled to the Praetorium, where they continued to fight racial injustice.